Welcome to another episode of Masks Off. This is Kim Gross, and today my guest is Pamela Malo. I'm going to begin with a quote as I normally do, and this quote was provided by Pamela, and it is one of my favorites. So it says, "My beloved child, break your heart no longer. Each time you judge yourself, you break your own heart. You stop feeding on the love, which is the wellspring of your own vitality. The time has come, your time to live, to celebrate, to see the goodness that you are." And that is by Swami Kripalu. So many places to go. I do want to definitely talk about that quote, but I think what I want to do is start by having you introduce yourself in your own words, let the listeners know who you are, and then we'll circle back to this quote and then we'll go on with our conversation.
Sounds great. Well, first, thank you for having me. My name is Pamela Malo. I'm a registered dietitian and a health coach and a yoga instructor. And I think the heart of really what I do is help people explore and, if they want to, shift their relationship with food. I've been in this field for over 20 years. And what I found is that no matter what the immediate struggle or goal is, whether that's training for a marathon or improving blood pressure and heart health or ending chronic dieting, it really comes down to how we connect and think about food. So that is a lot of the work that I do, and self-compassion, and why I chose that quote is such a huge part of it.
So let's go back to the quote, because you also said that self-compassion is a huge piece of the work that you do with others. And as I mentioned, I listened to Tara Brach share this quote so many times when she would lead a guided meditation. And I've heard it over and over. And then something happened when I read it off of your form that it hit me in just such a more profound and deep way. And it's so true that when you need to hear something, the universe delivers. And again, I heard this quote so many times before, but the way it landed this time was so profound. So I want to go back and break it down. My beloved child, break your heart no longer. Each time you judge yourself, let's just start there, because when you and I talked before, we talked about this inner critic that we can all have. And I want to say that while I don't necessarily know that I hear myself criticizing myself per se, I probably do. I'm sure that I do. But I do know that I'm always pushing myself to do more, to do better, to be perfect. So therefore, what I am doing or what I have done isn't good enough.
Right. Yes. Very relatable.
And then in that, there is the inner critic, right? In the fact that I am never enough, or seeing my goodness. Inadvertently, I am judging myself. So then it's each time you judge yourself, you break your own heart and you stop feeding on the love, which is the wellspring of your own vitality. So I wonder if we just pause there for a moment, if you have some thoughts on what I just shared so far.
I did my yoga teacher training at Kripalu. And so Kripalu yoga is the yoga of self-compassion. And that opening of that quote, my beloved child, break your heart no longer, it is just infused with such kindness and care, sort of like this benevolent, like grandmother kind of like yummy energy. And many of us don't have that. We have more of that like striver, that perfectionist, which sometimes we often tell ourselves is like needed. If I didn't have that, then I would just sit on the couch all day and watch television, which generally isn't true, but it's sort of one of the ways that we get hooked by the inner critic. The inner critic can have a lot of different tactics and ways that it attaches to us. And I think what you are talking about is not necessarily calling yourself stupid and that kind of judgment, but more of the never enough, which is a more subtle, but also kind of powerful form of judgment as well.
Yes, I love that you clarified that point, because that's what I was saying. I don't really notice that I'm calling myself fat, ugly, and stupid, but I do know that since I've been a teenager, I've never felt thin enough, good enough, smart enough, whatever. So I've always been in this place of over striving, over achieving, and seeking validation on the outside. Whereas I feel as if this quote is allowing us to turn it back inward, to go back inward and find the compassion and the love. What would you say about that?
No, absolutely. I mean, throughout our life, there probably have been and maybe are at any point in time outside voices who either directly or we assume or insinuate are kind of judging or critiquing us. But the one that we live with 24/7 every single day is our own inner voice. And I think what you're talking about in the quote is the empowerment when you realize that you also have the power to change it. So it's not as damning as if someone else or some external force that we can't control is doing these things to us.
So you mentioned a few minutes ago, and even when we talked the last time, that the inner critic can have so many different flavors to it. It can sound differently. It can have different names, even, I think you said. Can you help us to understand in case we're unaware of our inner critic? Because for me, most of my life, I just thought that was me. I just thought my inner critic was part of me. I didn't realize it was an inner critic until I knew it was an inner critic. So if you can help others to understand what it might sound like, what it might feel like to have one.
So this is where it's a little bit different for everyone. And as you said, we can have multiple critics. So there's places that an inner critic is likely to appear. And for some people, it might be their career or their intelligence. For other people, it can be their body. For other people, it can be their parenting. For other people, it might be creativity. So you might have different critics in different areas, or just one area where your critic is really strong. And one exercise that I do with folks, in fact, I just did it last night in a class that I'm teaching, is guiding people through an activity where they can connect with their inner critic. And if you want, we could do it right now together with
Yeah,
you.
let's do it. This is the first time that we're doing like an exercise or an activity in real time. So let's do it.
Great. So I'm going to ask you to think of something, and you won't be sharing this, but that your inner critic has said to you recently. And once you have that, just let me know what it is.
You want me to say it out loud or just?
Definitely don't have to.
Okay.
That part, yeah.
Okay, I got it.
And then if you want to, you can close your eyes and sort of go back to a time recently where you heard that voice. And I want you to, I'll be quiet for a moment so you can sort of hear it in your own mind. And then I invite you to think of what are some adjectives that would describe this voice? Does it sound angry? Does it sound people-pleasing? Does it sound, what adjectives would you give to it?
It's kind of like, what's wrong with you? You should know better. You know this stuff. You're not getting it right. Come on, Kim.
So kind of judgy, maybe condescending.
Yep, for
Yeah.
sure.
And almost like I'm hearing irritation and maybe sort of like frustration or like an urgency, like we have to move faster.
Like, get it right. You need to get this. You need to figure this out and get it right. Otherwise, big consequences.
And then if you can think back to this quote being shared with you by your critic, does it speak? Does it sound more like an older voice or does it sound like a younger voice? Can you give it a rough age?
Mm. It feels like an older voice telling me.
Okay, great. And does it speak to you rapid fire or sort of slow and drawn out or somewhere in the middle?
I think kind of rapid fire.
If you were to, and you can use your imagination here, begin to sort of flesh out a character here. So it's sort of this impatient, condescending, older kind of voice. What kind of character would it be? Would it be like a gym coach or like an older librarian or
I don't know
what?
why, but I just saw the Wicked Witch in the Wizard of Oz, like pointing her finger at me.
Great. Yes. So good. So good. And just to kind of stay with that, can you imagine what kind of life this wicked witch lives?
Yeah, she's just kind of crotchety and rigid and all uptight and no joy at all, just a scowl on her face all the time.
Great. And what do you want to call her? Is she Wicked Witch or does she have another name?
Olga comes to mind.
Olga.
Olga.
Great. Okay. So, what's the feeling that you get when Olga is speaking to you?
Like tense, like my whole body, my shoulders want to just tense and tighten.
Great. Yes. All right. Well, I'd like to introduce you to your inner critic, Olga, the Wicked Witch. Tell me what you're noticing.
Well, first of all, I could feel the persona, right? I didn't feel that it was me anymore. I felt like there was someone there separate. So that's helpful to give some distance and space and not overly identify. Although
Yes.
I did feel kind of like a little girl, like cowering and my body freezing and leave me alone kind of thing, you know?
Right. And all of that is really good information because when you start to feel that, it's a great opportunity to check in and say, oh, is Olga here? Is she, whispering things into my ear and saying things
Mm.
to me?
That is so super profound to just be able to separate that way. Like it's something that I've cognitively have known for a long time, but I just embodied that. So thank you for taking me through that experience. And I'm so hoping that anyone who is listening can take themselves through the same experience, because now it just gives me that space, that separation, that when I go into that space, or maybe I won't hear the voice necessarily, but I might feel the body sensations. Like if I'm feeling my body for some reason being tense and tight, or my shoulders are cowering, now I can check in and say, is Olga here? I have the ability to then deconstruct that and process it differently from me feeling like I'm a bad person, that I'm not enough. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, 100%. And what you shared is having the name and the persona creates distance. And that's really what the goal is. Sometimes we don't want to look at our critics because they're uncomfortable and they're mean to us. Why would I want to open that door and see who's behind that? We all have an inner critic. It's a hardwired part of how we are just as humans. It's a part of our safety instinct that want to keep us safe and small and just maintaining the status quo and nothing more. So anytime you are like doing a podcast or putting yourself out there in a vulnerable situation, it's such prime material for the critic to like pop up and just feel really uncomfortable because you're pushing the edges of your
Yeah.
emotional safety.
And we talked in the last conversation we had, you actually mentioned the imposter syndrome.
Yes.
And So, do you want to share a little bit more about how the imposter syndrome connects to what you just said about how it wants to keep us playing small? And maybe say either again or even a little bit more about that safety piece, because I think that's a key understanding for me, and I'm sure for others, that this is a wiring thing.
Yes. We don't have to make ourselves wrong for having this part of us. It is part of being human. So,
The imposter syndrome.
syndrome, yeah. So that term was coined in the 70s by some researchers who were looking at very high achieving female lawyers who,
Mm.
despite having a lot of success internally, they always felt like they weren't enough and something was wrong with them and they had to prove themselves. And so our internal experience is largely driven by how we talk to ourselves. And so I see such a strong connection between the inner critic and imposter syndrome, because if we can change that inner dialogue, we are not likely to feel as such strong imposters, or we'll be able to have a different relationship with it and just realize that it is just the inner critic who's talking and delivering us these thoughts and feelings. And again, not the truth of the universe, not anything we have to heed and listen to in our daily life. It can be in the back seat, not in the driver's seat.
Yeah, I love that. And so let's connect that a little bit more to what you actually do in terms of helping people with food. So, as I said, that I have had an eating disorder since I was 10 years old, body image issues since I've been 11. So, and that type of imprint that I had was put on me a long, long time ago, ingrained and there for many, many years, decades, right? So, are you suggesting then or saying that part of being able to recover from that is changing the inner critic? Is the inner critic part of what keeps us stuck in body image issues? Because there's so many people walking the planet that hate themselves for the way they look, whether it's gray hair or the wrinkles or it's the fat or it's I have this mole or I have this scar or whatever it is. And I think we fixate on it, we obsess on it.
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting because what we tell ourselves is if I didn't have this mole or this, or that, things would be different. And yet, supermodels who have the culturally idealized body proportions, they too also have this. And they too also feel insecure and inadequate and not enough. And like things could or should be different or be better. It's also important to recognize it's part of the culture that we swim in, where we are just fed these messages of not enough. You know, like consumerism feeds on the fact of us going out and trying to buy things to make ourselves feel better and to change what's wrong. And I also just want to honor your journey with your relationship with food and your eating disorder, because that is a powerful teacher and it's something that not everyone is willing to open up and share about. And so I really just want to honor that. Can you recall having like a strong inner critic during when you were most active or strongly experiencing that?
Yeah, 100%. I've shared this story before, but I think it's important to share it again because it supports what you just said about that inner safety piece. So my inner critic was trying to keep me safe. So for me, it happened when I was 11 and I hit puberty. It was almost overnight. When I was 10 years old, I was very thin, flat as a board. And then between the ages of 11 and 12, I hit puberty and I grew several inches. I filled out completely. My breasts were super big, my butt, my hips. I have stretch marks still to show how quickly my body stretched and changed overnight. And I was very, very aware of how different I looked compared to my peers because they still weren't, most were not hitting puberty yet. So they still had these little boy and girl bodies. And all of a sudden, I have this woman body that also got me in trouble because the boys ostracized me. They would call me names and make fun of me. So there's the safety piece. Now I don't feel like I'm part of the herd. I don't feel like I belong because I look different and I feel different. So then the inner critic started making me perfect and
Yeah.
perform. And it was in my grades and it was in sports, because then I could get the validation. Then it was like, oh, Kim, you're so smart. You get straight A's, and isn't that great and wonderful? My little girl mind was, well, then if they focus on me perfecting and performing, they won't pay attention to how my body looks. But I hated the way my body looked. I hated myself for it.
Yeah, yeah. And it was a effective strategy for the time to do that for yourself. So it's kind of brilliant how even as kids, we do these things and maybe we don't want to carry these behaviors on for the rest of our life, but they do. What you're describing to me sounds like you were creating psychological safety for you the best way that you knew how. And
Absolutely.
that's powerful. And
Mm.
today, many of us are in a place of physical safety. We have our basic needs met of food and shelter, but emotional safety is where we are vulnerable, exposure, social media, other people's opinions. And so the inner critic really is just trying to keep you in your realm of safety. It doesn't care about fulfillment or joy or pursuing your goals. It's just like, let's stay here and not ever venture out of the edge. I imagine you've seen those memes where there's a circle and it points to like your comfort zone to the middle of the circle. And then the whole area around it is like where the magic happens. Your inner critic just wants you to stay in that inner circle so much.
Okay, so I love this. We have really explained what the inner critic sounds like, why we have the inner critic, how it keeps us safe. But as we are also starting to allude to, that it doesn't serve us anymore, right? It doesn't really serve us if we want to have that purpose, that meaning, that fulfillment, those meaningful relationships, even. So now this is where my podcast comes in, because we put on the masks also to protect ourselves. And so if we're saying the inner critic serves as a way of protecting our vulnerable parts, our heart, our inner landscape, the masks do the same, but it doesn't allow for freedom, for joy, peace, fulfillment, all the things, expansiveness, even all the things that I believe we are meant to have and do in this lifetime. And they are limiting us and holding us back. So, what are your thoughts then, besides awareness? Because that's the very first step, is being aware. What are some things that you suggest to your clients or to people on how do you manage, how do you tame this inner critic?
You're right. The first step is awareness. The second step is, well, there's two. The first one is when you notice that sentence that the inner critic has offered you, like, you're not ready, or don't do that, or what's the matter with you, just put 4 words in front of it. My inner critic says, or for you, Olga says. And that way you create that distance. And there's several other techniques that you can use. One is an embodiment practice that I like that's very simple, is you literally stand up and open the door and let them walk out. Maybe you send them on a cruise. You can also say within yourself, thanks, but no thanks. I've got this one covered. You want to acknowledge, but not engage in an argument. That is really just the inner critic taking you away from something else that's more important. And you can't ever win an argument with the inner critic.
Why is that? Why can't you ever win an argument with the inner critic?
Because it is so slippery and wise, it will just find some other avenue to work against you. The hardwired part, it's not going to go anywhere. And so it's more shifting your relationship to those thoughts. Is that confidence is not the lack of self-doubt. It's just having a different relationship with self-doubt when those thoughts arise. It's not taking them as truth and something we have to listen to. The other thing that I do with folks I work with is introduce them to a kinder, wiser, more compassionate voice, which we all also have. But for most of us, the inner critic is just like loud and proud. It's the first one to offer its opinion. It's kind of shouting in our ear. Sometimes we don't even recognize it because it's just the background noise that we operate in. But, we also have an inner mentor, or you could call it an inner wise one. And for that, I do a guided meditation to take people through an experience of connecting with that kinder, softer, wiser energy. And so I think having that contrast between how the inner critic feels in our body and the things that it says to us, and also this other voice, which is the balm to the inner critic, can really help to not be under its thumb so much.
And then what you're saying is the quote, right? Because when I read the quote, that feels like a balm to my soul, right? So again, I just think we can maybe kind of bring it full circle and read the quote again and just maybe even marinate in it a little bit. I'll read it slowly. So it's, my beloved child, break your heart no longer. Each time you judge yourself, you break your own heart. You stop feeding on the love, which is the wellspring of your own vitality. The time has come, your time, to live, to celebrate, and to see the goodness that you are. I think that's it. It's all about cultivating a practice to see, feel, embody, and know the goodness that you are. I sense that there are so many of us walking this earth that do not sense the goodness in them. And I also feel and believe and sense that many people might go an entire lifetime, their whole lifetime, and never know the goodness that they are, because the inner critic is driving the bus.
Yeah.
Isn't that sad?
It is. It really is, because what I think about is all the energy that is taken up by that voice and that energy that could be directed to solving world hunger or just having a different world experience. I think it would free up so much for people to use their vital life force and energy in a different direction.
I think that this has been such a profound conversation, and the work that you're doing is so meaningful and impactful. I know, at least for me, it touched me because just that simple notion of my inner critic is not me, and to have that distance and that separation makes such a huge difference for me to now be able to have the space to invite in that kind, compassionate one, so that I can explore my goodness, so that I can feel and know my goodness.
Yes, absolutely. And it's a journey,
Yeah.
it's kind of like you said, a practice. It's something that we can literally practice every single day, and not in a perfectionistic sense, but there really is no arrival. We can keep working on that. And there's moments of feeling that sense of self-actualization and joy and pleasure and contentment with who we are. And then there's moments where we don't. And I think it's more just about sort of tipping the scale in the favor that you want, is important.
So just to end then, do you have an idea or a tip or strategy for how someone can, on a daily basis, bring in that sense of goodness?
So how to proactively move towards that voice versus just away from the inner critic. Here's what I would say: catching yourself in the moments where it happens. There is research by Rick Hansen. He has a practice called taking in the good. And it is when it's positive or good, or you just catch yourself, like appreciating your smile or your eyes or something. don't let that moment pass you by. Really marinate in it, linger in it. That is the best way to continue to have more of those experiences. And the more we realize that this is within us, we do have this capacity to be caring and kind.
So how can people find you?
My website is pamelamalo.com, and I do complimentary sessions with folks so they can get to know me and see if they might want to do some deeper work together. I have an email list, and yeah, would love to connect with anyone who's interested.
Phenomenal. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me.
Thank you, Kim. You are such a delightful soul, and I'm really, really glad that we got to meet and to do this. And I would absolutely love to stay in touch.
Definitely, for sure. Thank you, everybody, for joining for another episode of Masks Off. I'm Kim Gross, and I will see you next time.